Thank you, Mark. Uh, in the U.S., we aren't facing the same challenges at the present time that they are in the European Union or in the UK when it comes to irregular migration across open waters, because our southern border is so very easy for people to walk across. With Texas and now Florida and likely other states who are going to take steps to attempt to prevent illegal immigration, this may change illegal immigration patterns. Certainly political instability in Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly in Haiti, at the moment, will also provide future challenges. And when we talk about political instability, certainly in Haiti, that's a longstanding problem that we faced, and George touched on a lot of the issues that we faced in the 90s. So, I would say that the United States is not well equipped to deal with this potential change in illegal immigration patterns, and it's a political challenge more so than a legal one. We do have the President of the United States, despite what he may say, has the legal authority to take action to stop this. Whether he will or not, or whether he will be compelled to, is the ultimate question. And we were talking about, what the topic of this panel would be. The political situation in Haiti was at the forefront of the news, and we were expecting to see more illegal crossings by boat. And Governor DeSantis certainly was anticipating this, or at least politically, he was thinking he needed to get out in front of this by saying that he was going to take action, or he was going to task Florida law enforcement with taking action to interdict boats that may come from Haiti. And as George pointed out, there are laws and legal protocols in place to deal with migrants who are attempting to land. The ultimate goal is to land within the United States, coming by sea. Clearly, the United States has the authority to prevent this, but there are questions about where you interdict these boats. Are you doing it in U.S. territorial waters, or are you doing it on the high seas and international waters? And again, the volume of illegal immigration that's coming across the Caribbean is not as high as we're seeing in the Mediterranean or the English Channel, though it has increased under the Biden administration compared to the recent past. What we now see is a few thousand people coming in as opposed to a few hundred previous to the Biden administration. But again, this pales in comparison to the millions of people who are coming across or through Central America and Mexico and crossing the southern border of the United States, and who are being released into the United States by our government. We also see people who are flying in, and CIS certainly did a good job of publicizing what might not be a secret program, but certainly is not well publicized by the Biden administration for obvious reasons. And, I would raise the question, has Biden's humanitarian parole program stopped more boats from coming? I would say probably. We can't prove one way or the other, but I think it's a reasonable thing to suggest that it's sort of been a pressure valve for people who aren't coming in, who want to come in, are being allowed to come in through these programs, which George would agree, are an abuse of the president's parole authority. I would also suggest that if there's one thing we want to credit the Biden administration for doing to stop illegal immigration, we can say they prevented lots of boats from coming over. Whether that's because people are finding other ways to get in is another question, but the Biden administration hasn't had to deal with that. What for previous administrations, the Bush administration and certainly Clinton administration, were political headaches. And really the task that the Biden administration has set for itself isn't stopping illegal immigration, it's managing its flow. How to best manage the flow, and so that the political optics are, at least in their opinion, in their favor. And I would also point out that there was an agreement with the Mexican president or the government of Mexico. We don't know exactly what that agreement was, but we do know that the Mexicans are doing something on their end, and how long that will persist and how tough they will be in preventing illegal immigration, I think is an open question. But if Mexico continues to prevent the flow through Mexico, will people then feel the necessity to try to get here by sea? Yes, there are obvious logistical challenges involved: resources, manpower, command and control of sea borders. I think anyone who's ever been on the open water understands how much more dangerous it is than being on land. These dangers are compounded with, as George pointed out, many of the migrants who are coming aren't traveling on necessarily very seaworthy vessels. And so we have the obligation to make sure that these people are, if possible, that are rescued or at least conveyed safely somewhere so that they're not drowning in the seas. And the dangerous journeys, and we see it across land borders as well, the reason that people are making these journeys is because they believe, quite rightfully when it comes to the United States, that they're going to be allowed into the United States. The way to prevent boats is to interdict them, first of all, in the open waters and send them back. But the other thing is the people who do end up making it to the United States aren't going to be released into the United States to reside, to work, to remain for long term, that they will be detained until they have an immigration hearing. That will stop people from making the dangerous journey by land or by sea. In our last panel, I talked about how the majority of inadmissible immigrants who are entering inadmissible aliens who are entering the U.S. aren't claiming asylum. And those who do most of them will have their asylum claims rejected if they go through the adjudication process. Despite this fact, illegal border crossers are still often portrayed in political debates and in media reports as somehow having the right under U.S. law to enter, to reside, and to work in the country. And I would borrow a famous legal phrase from the U.S., the penumbra. They're coming under the penumbra of asylum law. And what I mean by that is this encompasses anyone coming from anywhere in the world who is trying to escape poverty or areas of high crime or referred to as climate refugees, or simply want to come to work in the United States because they want a better life. Not everyone is getting into the United States, but almost everyone is getting in. According to the DHS secretary, I think it was Woody Allen that said, 85% of success is just showing up. Well, that's about what it is for the people who are showing up at the U.S. border. Their success of getting into the country is very high. And so when people push back and say it's not open borders, it's pretty close. The challenge of establishing operational control over our land and sea borders is real, but it's not the main impediment that we face. The main impediment is that our federal government is run by one political party that acts as if the rule of law is irrelevant to the functioning of our immigration system, and another party that complains a lot about the abrogation of law, but then votes to fund its continuation. In February, the U.S. House of Representatives impeached Secretary of Department of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. Only the second time this has happened in U.S. history, and then 2 weeks ago voted to fund the very policies that he implemented for which he was impeached. In January, I spoke about how this is a genuine constitutional crisis that we're facing. I don't think anyone can make a convincing argument that President Biden is faithfully executing his duties to carry out the laws passed by Congress. And Mark asked me in January, what do you do when you have an executive who won't enforce immigration law? And I think that's the $1 million question, or I guess in today's inflationary terms, the $1 trillion question. What are we going to do about this? And, I want to touch on what George and Victor have raised and sort of put that in the context of practical applications of dealing with how to stop this. I'll say, to compare it to what we see in the EU, we have individual countries who are trying to implement specific immigration policies to deal with specific national interests and challenges that they're facing. And a lot of pushback is coming from the EU government in Brussels. I think we compare that somewhat to what's happening in the United States. Immigration policy is set in Washington, D.C. at the federal level, but we see the effects felt at state and local levels. And what is the role for state and local governments to play? I ran this by George earlier this week, and when my argument is it's very much an open question as to what states can do. And George said to me, well, you're not wrong, which is about the highest praise I think you can have from a lawyer. So briefly, just to talk about,
you paid your bill on time. I think that would be
okay. When we're looking at Texas with SB 4, which allows Texas law enforcement to arrest people who are coming over the border illegally, or we're seeing what Governor DeSantis does, which is to prevent people from coming into this to the state by boat. There's a difference between what we do see the states being allowed to do, which is to, for instance, mandatory e-verify or deal with people and have consequences for people who are in the state already illegally, as opposed to trying to prevent people from entering their borders, foreign nationals from entering their borders. It's a very different question. And I think that's very much open for the courts to decide. And the way we see the Supreme Court deal with these issues with Texas and other states, I think will largely determine the future of immigration policy, particularly when we have an executive who doesn't want to enforce the law. And so I would say my main point here is we're not seeing a lot of boats coming from Haiti or elsewhere. That may change depending on what we see the Mexican government do or states do as well. And I don't think that our immigration system is able to respond to a genuine crisis like we're going to see continue in Haiti. It would be very optimistic to think that Haiti is going to be stabilized politically in short order. This is a problem we've been dealing with for decades. I think it's a problem we're going to have to deal with for many more years. And our federal government at this time basically has set up a system which is unable to respond to acute crises, but also has sent the message out that if you come to the United States, we're going to let you in as an economic migrant, and that hinders our ability to deal with refugees and asylees in a practical manner, whether they're coming by land or by sea.